Like you, I always thought that if you're selling your car and someone pulls up with a building society cheque or a banker's draft, it's as good as a fistful of readies, better even than cash. In fact, I've sold hundreds of cars and taken drafts and building society cheques in payment and never had a single problem. But emerging from the sewers of the used car market is a disturbing trend. The building society cheque and the banker's draft that has all the value of lavatory paper. If you're selling your car privately, here is a cautionary tale. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now.
Recently, I had my 944 Porsche for sale in the Auto Trader. I had a few phone calls, and one was on a Monday afternoon from a man who phoned me saying he was coming from Leeds. Well, about 8:30, the phone rang, and it was a man who said his name was Mike from Leeds. He was at Lichfield train station. Could I pick him up? So I went down to the station. There he was, this guy, jumped out, waved me down. As we were driving back to my house, he said, "Is the car paid for? Is there any HP left on it?" Which I told him I'd paid for the car. When we arrived at my house, he looked all round the car, under the bonnet. I took him to test drive. He had a coffee. He was in no rush. About an hour and a half later, he took out a building society cheque, told me that it was made out in my name for £6,000 and would I accept £5,900. As far as I was concerned, that was fine. I gave him £100 and waved goodbye to my car.
So there you are, with a building society cheque in your hand. You took it down to the bank. What happened next?
2 days later, they rang me up and told me it was a forgery. Well, I just couldn't believe it, you know. I thought, no way, it couldn't happen to me.
Luckily, Dave's story has a happy ending because his insurance company were understanding enough to compensate him for the loss of his car. But in 95% of cases, the seller loses everything. Like one bloke who swapped his gleaming Mercedes for a building society cheque with 13,600 written on it that bounced all the way to Jupiter and back.
We had several inquiries on the car and several interesting inquiries. This was followed up by one particular gentleman who came to visit the car on 3 separate occasions, even bringing his mechanic to see the car. We agreed a price on the car, and he duly delivered a cheque to me. 10 days later, and after the cheque had been presented to the bank, it was returned to me as refer to drawer. I approached my insurance company, and the insurance company now tell me that this is theft by deception. Under the terms of the policy, I'm not covered. I'm now £13,600 light.
You need to have your eyes peeled for 3 types of wafty cheque: the forgery, the stolen one, and the colour photocopy. Dave started life as a genuine cheque photocopied numerous times on a laser colour copier, which the fraudsters at the last count used in 14 separate scams, and the financial institutions say there's precious little they can do.
Where a crime has been committed, where someone has actually forged the cheque, or the cheque has been stolen, and signatures have been added to that cheque, then there's very little we can do. We can only ever be one step behind the criminal. Now, it's very difficult for the man in the street, it's very difficult even for the expert to tell the difference. The only way you can be sure as a member of the public that you've got your money is by having the cheque or draft honoured by the bank or building society it's drawn on. It's going to take a few days, but it's worth it in the end.
And it is a growing problem. For example, since 1987, about 10,000 cheques have been stolen from banks and building societies, and they all come home to roost at some time. Here at West Midlands Police, they see literally hundreds of dodgy cheques every week.
The private motorist is vulnerable because they don't know what one building society draft looks like over another. And because they're not aware of whether they've been stolen or if they're counterfeited, they accept them at face value, believing them to be as good as cash. I don't believe the banks and the building societies have done enough by way of publicising the thefts when they occur. So far as counterfeiting is concerned, of course, those are matters that are beyond their control.
Or are they? Personal cheques already have security markings.
As far as the high street banks are concerned, they're incorporating ultraviolet ink in the printing of their cheques to prevent counterfeiting.
And building society cheques and drafts?
There is no such ultraviolet ink being used to prevent counterfeiting.
Absolutely nothing at all, in fact.
Absolutely nothing at all.
But there are moves afoot, I hear, to tighten things up.
There are security printers, Kenrick and Jefferson, have in fact mocked up a cheque where you can see ultraviolet ink being used. You can see the metallic stripe, which shows as a solid line through, and also the watermark quite clearly visible. That would prevent counterfeiting effectively.
And you've got one there with a hologram as well?
A hologram, which again is a security device, but which is visible to the naked eye and which will authenticate that cheque as genuine.
So what we need to see on Building Society checks and bankers' drafts are several things. We need to see the metallic strip, we need to see the watermark, we need to see the ultraviolet ink and the hologram, and only that way will the problem start to disappear.
So there you are, a particularly slimy form of fraud, but it's happening a lot. The bottom line is, if you're selling your car, never, ever, ever take payment in the form of a banker's draft or building society cheque without clearing it first. Otherwise, you could be surrendering your hard-earned motor for one of these that isn't worth the paper it's printed on.